The next section we're going to deal with malware protection has to do with maintaining our OS. And so we're going to go down to slide 38 here, maintaining an operating system. Now, one thing you might notice here is that we don't have a whole section on antivirus software. Why is that? Well, it's because now antivirus, that is to say Windows Defender antivirus, built into Windows is pretty good. As a matter of fact, it's pretty much as good as most of the paid antivirus software that you find on the market. So because it's good enough that it's on par with those, we don't typically recommend that you put third-party antivirus software on your system any longer. And if you're paying, $100 a month or whatever it is for antivirus software, personally, I recommend that you don't, unless you have some specific reason for doing that. Because now Microsoft has stepped up to the plate and come up with a very, very good antivirus software. So maintaining the operating system also includes maintaining that antivirus software and those updates. Now here we're talking mainly about updates. Updates are very, very important these days because Microsoft, as well as other companies, are constantly on the lookout for bugs, for vulnerabilities, where software can open up, that is the operating system or other software, can open up these vulnerabilities or these weaknesses in the software that might allow an attacker to get in. They do that through some various channels. One is through what they call white hat testers. In other words, people who have permission to do the testing and to find those vulnerabilities. And then we have black hat attackers who don't necessarily report problems, but because they disseminate the information to other black hat attackers, we can intercept that information and learn about those vulnerabilities. There's also a group called gray hat hackers. Gray hat hackers are the ones that tend to use black hat techniques. In other words, their techniques are not always within the law. They sometimes use illegal methods to do it, but then they like to report their findings to the company in order to help the company secure their system better. Those are gray hat attackers, or hackers, I should say. And so we don't necessarily list them here, but that's another category of them. Some updates are very urgently needed. So some are installed in your Windows system not on the second Tuesday of the month, which is Patch Tuesday, when typically updates are made, but are made in between times. It's very, very difficult to keep up with attackers and with these bugs, but by allowing this, the very, very urgent ones to go through quickly, we can at least keep most of them down most of the time. If it's a Windows Server machine, Windows Server comes with something called WSUS, or Windows Server Update Services. Now let's go to a Windows Server machine here. And I haven't logged on to this. I should have logged on before this, because it might take a little while for it to get there. So we'll come back to that once it gets logged in. Anyway, Windows Server machines have this role called WSUS, or Windows Server Update Services. The idea of it being that if I have a company with, let's say, 1,000 PCs, I don't want each PC having to go to Microsoft and getting their updates. Why not just download that update once to the server, and that way I can test them first and make sure they don't break something, like break software that I'm using, and then push them out from the server to the client computers on my domain. So let's take a look at that. If I say add roles and features here on my server, and I drill down here to the roles, here's Windows Server Update Services. Whoops, if I cancel it there, I hit the next and went on to features. Windows Server Update Services. So if I turn that on and install that, now I have the capability of setting up and controlling how updates go out to the systems on my domain. Now I also have to set up a group policy in order for those to receive those update services, but those updates from my system. But anyway, you can see that that is a role here in server. Now Linux and Mac OS, again, we're not going to deal with Linux and Mac OS in this class, so I won't get there. File systems, though, let's take a look at these file systems. Files, of course, tend to accumulate until you just get too many. occupy large amounts of disk space. If you get too much, if you get over 90% of your disk space used, that disk tends to slow down tremendously in seeking files. And so you have to have some way to keep up on them. Now, as far as just deleting files that you have on there, that's up to you. You have to come up with your own system, your own program for doing that. But as far as temporary files and temporary folders, in other words, those that are created by the system, for example, when you install software, those files can accumulate, and Windows can keep track, or does keep track of those temporary files and folders, and can delete them upon your request. So you certainly should, once in a while, delete temporary files and temporary folders, and to do that you use this disk cleanup tool. So if I go into settings and type cleanup, here are disk cleanup recommendations and delete temporary files. Let's just click delete temporary files, and you'll see here that it actually began doing that immediately. So cleanup recommendations is down here, and here is a list of things that it's recommending that I clean up, right? So I can check what I want to clean up and let it delete those things. Temporary files, right now I'm not using very much in temporary files. Windows 10 also includes something called Storage Sense. Now when this is enabled, and it's not enabled by default, by the way, when it's enabled, you can also manage, for example, the recycle bin and the downloads folder. And you can say, hey, after a certain point, I want the recycle bin to empty files, for example, older than a month, or whatever you want. So let's go back into settings again. I'm going to type Storage Sense. Turn on Storage Sense is right here. And oh, here it is right here. You see that I have it on. It's not on by default. I have mine turned on. And how often do I want Storage Sense to run? How often do I want it to delete my recycle bin? So you can see anything right now older than 14 days in my recycle bin will be deleted. So if I haven't used it, if I haven't recalled it in 14 days, it will go away. And then delete files in my downloads folder. Again, after 14 days, if it's been sitting in my downloads folder, it will go away. So I need to move it somewhere else if I want it somewhere else. Now, this only occurs when Storage Sense runs. So I can choose how often I want Storage Sense to run. I have mine run every day. So once a day it will run, and it will check my recycle bin, and it will check my downloads folder. I can run it right now if I want to run it right now. Storage Sense is pretty cool, actually. Disk quotas can be set up on a server using this File Server Resources Manager. So if I install File Service Resource Manager on the server, I can now set how many gigabytes of space I can allow you to use on my server folders. So in other words, I can allow you as a client to store stuff on my server, but once you reach whatever it is, 5 gigabytes, 10 gigabytes, or whatever, then you will be restricted from that. I can also set other kinds of policies there as well, by the way. For example, I can do what we call screening. And screening says, hey, you can only store, you can store everything except executable files. Or let's say I don't want you storing big media files, so I can keep you from storing MP4 files or MP3 files or MPG files, because people tend to store lots of those and they take up lots of space. So I can restrict those if I want those to be restricted. Here we go into the Linux stuff. I'm not going to go into that. Last, we're going to go into virtual memory and backups. So we'll leave that for the next video.